Right to Be Read podcast, episode number 35. Interview with Pat Flynn.
You are listening to the Right to Be Read podcast, and this is your host, Ani Alexander.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Right to Be Read podcast, the podcast that inspires and encourages writers. Today, I have a very special guest. I waited for him until 2 a.m. to record, but he's worth it, I'm absolutely sure. It's Pat Flynn. Pat Flynn makes a living on the internet and considers himself the luckiest person on earth. Through his very popular blog called Smart Passive Income, he shows his experience and helps his readers reach their goals. So besides that, Pat was the first person who encouraged me to start this podcast, actually. That is why I'm really, really happy to have you here, Pat. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and just congratulations. This is so cool because I was just talking to you right before we started recording. I remember our first conversations we had about sort of what you should do, and you've taken the advice and you've run with it and you've done so well, and you just passed, thousands of people are listening to your show now, and it's just incredible. So congratulations to you, and also hello to everybody out there listening.
Thank you very much. Well, many people are asking me how come I had the access to you. So after I had it and you gave advice, I just couldn't afford not listening to that. So.
Oh, thank you for taking the advice and actually doing it. That's cool.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for spending the time, because I know that people like you who are very popular are usually difficult to access, and they are usually very busy and don't have time. So I really appreciated that.
Oh, no problem. I think it is actually helpful that you are on the other side of the world from where I am. I'm in the U.S., for those of you listening, and I do my work late at night, typically when everybody here is asleep. So Annie and I were connected through Facebook, through this Facebook Kindle group, which we'll be talking about, I'm sure. And she has provided a lot of value in that group. And because of that, I was more than happy to help her out a little bit. And of course, now she has a podcast and thousands of downloads, and now we're on the show together. This is so cool.
Yeah, who would imagine, huh? Well, I want to start with something I read in your blog and also in your book. And that's mainly the statement which I would like you to elaborate. And it says, getting laid off was the best thing that ever happened to me. So can you elaborate that and explain why you say it?
Sure. When you hear that phrase, getting laid off, you think immediately a lot of negative things, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. And those were definitely things that I was feeling at the time when I was told I was going to be laid off. This was in a position in the architecture field that I had, and this was back in 2008 when I was told the news. It was not happy news at first. But over time and through a lot of struggles and a lot of sort of soul searching and trying to figuring out what to do, looking back now, I've made a lot of decisions that helped me get to where I'm at today as an entrepreneur, as an author, as a business owner, that I wouldn't have made if I didn't get laid off. And I always think back to that day and I wonder what would happen if I actually wasn't laid off. What would I be doing today? I would still be doing architecture. I'd probably be happy, but I wouldn't even know anything about this world or even try anything in this world because I was totally happy, quote, happy and secure in that job. But like I said, it was definitely a huge blessing in disguise. And now, I see it as things happen for a reason. It's sort of cliche to say that, but it did. It happened so that I could explore these other options and do what I can to, provide for my audience who I've built over time, but also make a great living for my family. And most of all, and most important to me, the new sort of career path that I've chosen after getting laid off it has allowed me to spend more time with my children as they grow up. And my son, we were just talking before this too about how he is now entering school. And it's like harder for me than it is for him. Yeah. Because I've been with him 24/7, or as long as I could be here at home since I work from home. And now he's off at school and he's not at home anymore. And I'm like, what am I going to do with myself? Because, I miss the guy. But that's what's most important to me. But yeah, the layoff, it all contributed to the happy stuff that I feel today.
So the layoff was absolutely the biggest trigger that led you to where you are now. But when you were back at work, did you have these thoughts of leaving and starting something on your own, but you didn't want to take the risk? Or you didn't even think about that before?
Well, I always wanted to do something sort of on the side. But I didn't have much time because of my architecture position. So that's one thing that the layoff helped with. I had all the time in the world to figure things out, whereas before I didn't, because I was so focused and actually drained from doing everything for my boss and that company. But I always envisioned myself becoming an entrepreneur at some point, something related in the architecture field 30 years down the road after becoming a project manager, after getting a lot of experience in the architecture field. I envisioned my future to be as a business owner, as a owner or principal at an architecture firm, but never would I've ever guessed in my wildest dreams that I would have been sort of a solo entrepreneur like this, and actually being able to change lives from my desktop computer or my laptop. It's just really amazing what we're able to do these days. And I think the coolest thing about all of this is now, people thank me by name. Thanks, Pat. And this was always happening even after I started my architecture website after I got laid off, where I was helping people pass an exam. They're like, Pat, thank you so much for helping me pass this exam. And now it's, Pat, thank you for the podcast, or thank you for writing this book. It's like they're addressing me by name. And if I stuck with architecture, I was working even harder than I am now, and way more hours. And I wasn't really getting thanked for that work. Nobody was calling me by name. And when we think about it, nobody knows who designed the buildings that we're in, like right now, or that we go through. We don't even think about that. But here we are in my own little world online, and people are thanking me by name. That's like just the craziest and coolest part about it.
I see. Well, and actually in your first book, Let Go, you talk about this journey. You started from the point when you were laid off until the point where you are now. So when you wrote this book, you were already quite popular. Actually, you were more or less where you are now, and you already were making money online. So what made you decide to write a book?
Well, the book was a decision that I made because, I've told my story before, and every time I've told a story in a blog post or just, a quick 5 minutes in an interview here or there, it's always resonated really well with people. I know it's a great story, and when you have a great story, you need to tell it. But I was only being able to tell it on these short format, content platforms. And, so the book idea came about when people kept asking me, well, how did you feel when this happened? Or, can you give me more information about this? Or, what was it really like? Tell me. And so the book was a great way to sort of address all those things and actually take people deep inside my brain and my heart at the time of when I got laid off, and everything I was going through, all the doubts, all the struggles, all the decisions I made, everything that helped along the way, everybody else that had an influence on my life at that point, from my then fiance and now wife, to my dad, to other people who were doing online business already. It was a great way to sort of package all that into one sort of story, and also just provide that much more inspiration, more than a 5-minute interview or a blog post could do. So that's really where it started, and it's just been amazing, the reaction from people. I launched it on a platform called Snippet App, and that was also a big trigger in terms of getting it started, because these guys over at Snippet App, they were creating this iPhone app that allowed you to create stories in a way that was never possible before, which is through text like a book, but also with integrating images and integrating videos and also integrating social media. So I was like, wow, this is really cool. Maybe I can check this out. And they invited me to be one of the first authors on the platform, which was really cool. And I knew that was a big risk because it was brand new, obviously, and I could have easily just put it on Amazon and because I had that following already, shot up really high in the rankings. But I wanted to tell my story the way it needed to be told, and so I did it on Snippet App with a lot of videos, interviews. I hired a videographer, my buddy Caleb, to follow me to San Francisco and shoot videos on location when certain decisions happened. And we visited the office where I was told I was going to be laid off, although we didn't add that into the book, actually. Interviews with my wife, my son, or my dad, and you could see my kids in there too. So it's very personal. It made it very personal. It made the story much more real, and just brought people into my life. It's that's what a book does, right? It sort of transports us, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. It transports the reader into that world world, and I wanted people to experience what it was like to be in that world at the time of that tragic moment, which actually turned into something amazing.
So which part was bigger, like your need to tell this story, or the demand that people had, like they wanted to find out more about the story, or both were equal? Which one kind of, made you decide to go for it? Because I can presume, since it's very personal story and you let people into your life and you kind of bare yourself, it's quite uncomfortable to do that. So it apparently you needed a big reason for this.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Although I'm sort of a little bit unique in the way that I share everything. Like if you follow my blog, you know that I share everything, including like how much money I make and where it comes from and stuff. So that was not really a big deal. I mean, there was a little bit of, I had to obviously talk to my wife about it, and because she was featured in the book too, she'd get her blessings, and same with my father and things like that. So those things were involved. But I think there's quite a big demand for the truth. I mean, not that every time I told the story it wasn't true, but the actual detailed feelings and accounts of everything that happened, just so people understood exactly what I went through, and that mainly to show that it's part like, hey guys, like, this internet business stuff, it doesn't happen overnight. There's going to be struggles along the way. There's going to be failures. You're going to have a hard time. You're going to want to give up. Here's how I went through all the same feelings that you're going through right now. That was one sort of, here's how it went down with me. And so you could, it became something people could relate to and be like, oh yeah, well, I'm feeling those same things right now. And Pat got through it, so I'm going to keep going. That was one big major reason to publish the book. But another big reason was to help differentiate myself in the market that I'm in, because the space that I'm in, especially with the online marketing, internet business space, there's a lot of people out there who try to hide themselves. They just put the best foot forward. They just try to present the best information and try to pretend to be perfect at everything. Mm-hmm. Whereas I sort of take a different stance in the space. I say, hey guys, I'm just Pat. I mess up a lot, and sometimes it goes well and I do things, and sometimes it doesn't go well, and here's exactly how I got started, just to sort of even more so become transparent and authentic with my audience. And I've heard from a lot of people who have read the book, like, wow, like I am even more a raving fan now of you because of the details you shared in that story. Those are in this story I shared a lot of the things that people would only kind of share with their best friends, right? Yeah. Or their family members. And that's how I treat my audience. I treat my audience like they're my family or my friends. So I want to share with them things that are a little bit personal. I mean, obviously there's a line there and everybody has a different line, but I wasn't I was okay with sharing a little bit more than I usually did on interviews in this book.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, I read the book and I had the same feeling that, first of all, the first feeling was that it was quite conversational. And when you read the book, you end up thinking, I know this guy, although you don't really know him personally. But you get like the feelings you had and the story you went through. After reading the book, you kind of feel closer to that person. And the second thing that one feels is I felt absolutely encouraged, because you see that this person who has reached so many goals and who's done so many things just a few years ago was in your shoes. And that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast as well. I'm trying to show people who were just like the listeners are now a few years ago, and to show that everything is possible and it's real and things happen. So your book completely illustrated the same message. And since you said that being personal and showing your story wasn't a big problem for you, which were the biggest challenges that you went through when you started writing your book? Since it was the first book you were writing, right?
Actually, it's interestingly enough, it was the second book that I started writing. It's the first book that I actually finished.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is an interesting story because I wanted to write a book about something that people were talking a lot about around my brand. I was sort of known, and I still am known, for this guy who is online and who's built a massive brand by not just starting in one place, or not just sort of being just a blogger, but being a blogger who also podcasts and does YouTube. So I'm sort of everywhere. I'm sort of known as this guy who's everywhere, or it might seem like I'm everywhere because I put myself on all these different popular platforms in all these different media formats. And so I was writing a book about that strategy, the strategy of sort of doing the things to make it seem like that wherever people go that you're there too with them. And so it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be on every platform, on every social media platform, and all of them. But it's just be on the most important ones, so it seems like you're everywhere. And so I was starting that book, and that was a massive challenge for me. I still haven't finished it. I don't know if it's something I'm going to finish, but that was one of the hardest things. I mean, just getting through a few chapters of that was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It's interesting because I've had a blog since 2007. Smart Passive Income has been there since 2008, and I've been cranking out content weekly for years. And I can do now, because I've been writing a lot, I can do a 4,000 word post in an evening. Mm-hmm. And, I remember a couple times I was sitting there on Scrivener just like with the next chapter in mind, and I was staring at a blank screen for an hour with like one sentence done. And it's just, I don't know, I had such a hard time because I was I was too worried about every single letter, every single word, every single paragraph. I wanted it to be perfect.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of writers out there can understand that, that's where the writer's block came from. And I learned that I was struggling because I was editing while I was writing.
Absolutely.
Those are two completely separate things. Editing is one thing that uses one side of the brain. Writing is another thing that uses a completely different section of the brain. And I read a bird that was recommended to me after talking about this called Bird by Bird. And it was about this woman who talks about her career with writing and getting over writer's block and, taking things one step at a time, bird by bird, one at a time, but also just not worrying about editing along the way. She pretty much just says, like, throw up on the screen, just put anything up there, write anything. Like, some people actually take their delete key off their keyboard to force themselves not to delete anything, which I think is a really smart idea, although I don't want to break my keyboard, so that's why I don't do that. But the point is just when you're in creative writing mode, you get rid of the editor in yourself. You just are creative, and you write whatever it is that you want to write up there. Like 80% of it is going to be crap, but that 20% that comes out, that's stuff that is amazing, and that wouldn't normally come out if you didn't give yourself a chance to just put it out there and see what comes out. And I learned the same thing actually when I started doing public speaking. When I started public speaking, which I was initially deathly afraid of, but I've been doing a lot of it now. But when I started to get really into it at first, I wrote down every single word of every single part of the presentation. Like, I scripted the whole thing. And I memorized 30 to 40 pages because I wanted to make sure I got it all right. And then I hired a coach because I was really serious about it. And my coach, I told him, hey, I script the whole thing. Isn't that like awesome how I do that? And then he's like, you are crazy. Why would you do that? And I said, well, I don't want to forget anything. Well, he's like, okay, well, I get that, but and this is the big moment here. He said, Pat, you are not giving yourself a chance to have a real conversation with your audience. You are not allowing yourself to be creative. And he's like, do you script your conversations that you have with your friends? And I'm like, no, that's silly. And he's like, exactly. And I was like, wow, okay. And he's like, just know what points you want to talk about or what stories you want to tell, and just tell them. Be confident in yourself. Amazing things are going to come out. When you talk to a friend, you don't know exactly what you're going to say, but you know kind of what you're going to say. And then it ends up becoming this really interesting story that's beautifully elaborated sometimes, and that, there's parts of it that you wouldn't have thought of before. I mean, stuff comes out when you just let it come out, and that's the same with writing. And so when I wrote Let Go, I sort of stopped with Be Everywhere because I was just really frustrated with it, and I started Let Go. And it was a lot easier because I took that approach too, but also because it was a story that I've told before, but I just was able to pull from personal experiences and put a lot more detail into it. And it was still difficult at times. There were times where I was still looking at the blank screen, but because I had outlined what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go, it was really easy for me to get right back on the path whenever I fell off.
I see. And maybe you were more passionate about the topic and it was more personal. That's why it came easier.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Well, since we're talking about Let Go right now, I know that when you started writing Let Go, or when you decided to write, I don't know when exactly, so you'll tell us about that, you created a closed Facebook group. and it became a very big and amazing community where Kindle writers help each other and support and ask questions and get different help and support from other members and from you as well. So what made you think about creating that Facebook group, and did you reach the main goals why you were creating those as a result, the group as a result, or you were expecting something else and it became better or worse? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I have this Facebook group that I started when I started writing Let Go, and I did that because I wanted to bring people through this journey with me. That's sort of what I've done on the blog all the time, and I didn't want to sort of flood my blog with daily posts about how I was writing this book. That would just become too overwhelming. But I gave the option for people who wanted to follow along to join me in this Facebook group and sort of see my progress. And, people love to see the progression of things. And, as I always do, I talk about, what I was doing or what my plans were and what I wish I'd done better and what I did right, what I did wrong, and things like that. And I was doing that. And it was great, and people loved it. And then it just started to grow and grow, and then it was like 500 people. I was like, wow, this is amazing, like people following my journey. And then I started to ask questions from a lot of people in the group because a lot of them were actually writers themselves. And it just ended up turning into this amazing writers resource where then it wasn't about me anymore. It was just about the whole community adding value to each other and sharing their success stories, sharing their books when they were published. And, there was a little bit of, and there was a little bit of, sometimes people would come in and just promote. And, that's not what the group is about. So we either, warn them or we just ban them, you're an admin too. And there's a great group of admins in there who are keeping control over it. And, now I'm looking at it right now. I just opened it. There are 7,758 members.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, that's bigger than some blogs and companies out there. And there's this group of amazing writers. You can check it out if you go to patsfirstbook.com. That'll redirect you to the Facebook page. It's the easy sort of way to get there. And, in terms of goals when setting up, I mean, really it was just to take people through my journey. When I came out with my book, I also knew that if people were sort of invested in, understanding and following along, that they would be more likely to pick up the book, but also more likely to share it because they would have felt like they were a part of it. And that was the case. And I don't remember exactly how many people were on it when I launched, but I think it was even less than 1,000, but it was still very helpful. And I think that the key strategy here for everybody out there who's writing is if you have an audience already, or even if you don't, you can start to build one by taking people inside. It's sort of opening up the factory doors. Back in the 1800s in the American Revolution, they started opening up all the factories and bringing families in and showing people around to see the kind of quality that they were putting into their products. And it just made people become more devoted to those brands. And it was a fun thing to do. So you could do that with your audience too. And then of course, by the time your book comes out, maybe you even have your audience participate or help influence where the book goes. I know there's a lot of people out there. There's a guy named Johnny B. Truant, and I believe his partner Sean, who they have this thing called Fiction Unboxed, I think, which he was telling me about, and that seems amazing. Like he openly wrote an entire fiction novel and talked about the entire process with his audience, and I think he even got his audience involved in helping determine some of the. I mean, if you have your audience help determine sort of a little bit of what the book's going to be about, even like, what the cover is going to look like or how the story ends or, what sections should go where and what. I mean, if they have any sort of a little bit of a say, of course they're going to get it when they get out. They're a part of it. But of course, if you do that, you want to thank them for it. And I've done my best to thank the people who are in the group. And now it's just grown to this amazing resource. And, I know it's here for when I write another book and I publish it, there'll be this many people who will check it out. And, I'm sure there's a lot of people in here who aren't in there for that reason. And, I don't care. It's a great resource. And a lot of people are learning how to start their businesses here and write books. But a lot of people are also very open and honest and caring to help others as well. Steve Scott is another one who I just interviewed on my podcast, who's been an incredible influence on a lot of people in this group as well. So to all the admins of this group, you're amazing. Thank you, Liz. There's another one, Liz Sauerbutts, and she's just amazing too. So, I mean, just everybody in there's great. You're great there too, Annie, and it's just pretty awesome what has been created here. So definitely, if you get a chance, give people a chance to see the progression of the book as it's being created, because once it's out there, you're going to have that ambassador group, but you also have some people who will be there to market it for you, but also just people who are going to have fun with it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the second stage of it was that, for me personally, this was one of the most original book launches that I've been to. You organized a virtual book launch, which was very different from the other, official and standard ones. So maybe you can share your experience about this. How did you come up with the idea, and, how well did it go, and how can our writers do the same maybe, or, something similar?
Yeah, well, the book launch, it was interesting because it was a little bit different because I had this sort of snippet app thing, but I also then later published it on Kindle. And the interesting thing about that is, Kindle is obviously all text, but there's a lot of videos that go along with it. So I link to the videos, and there's like resource pages and stuff that the book links to from Kindle. But as far as the launch is concerned, you really want to just treat it like an event. And, a lot of traditional books do this. And I don't think a lot of people in the digital book space or the Kindle book space really understand what that means is creating buzz for it, like with the group, but also in your audience and other influencers out there who may benefit from this book, or who have a target audience who may benefit from this book, getting connected with them, letting them check out the book for free, and, maybe even putting them in the book as part of a little marketing strategy as well, putting them as a part of the book, quoting it, or whether they write the foreword or write part of it, or maybe are included as an example in there. That's a great way for them to want to promote it once it comes out as well. Putting all those strategies into place, making an event out of it. And, it's interesting because I sort of launched this sort of a little bit soft at first. I didn't do as many emails as I should have. Email is obviously very important. But I did a little bit of an event, and then it sort of just sat there. It did really well, and it got to, pretty high in Kindle when it came out on Kindle. But then I had a great conversation with a guy named Jeff Goins from GoinsWriter.com, and I did this podcast with him, which is really cool because the book had been out already. He did really well on Kindle with also a traditionally published book, and I asked him on the show, like, hey, what would you do if you were me to promote this book again? And so those strategies were great. Whether you have a book coming out or you already have a book, you can just create an event in the future related to it and make things happen in order to promote it again. And so that's what I did. I sort of created this thing called Let Go Day, an event around the date that I was actually let go, which was there to help promote this book, but also just get people to understand why that book is there, but also just appreciate the fact that we have to let go of our fears and sometimes let go of the path that we were told to be on to go down the path that we need to go on. And so I did like a little 2-hour live stream. I gave away prizes. I brought my family on and talked to the audience and did a Q&A, and that was super fun. And then, going back to that podcast episode, I actually didn't publish it after that interview because I interviewed him again the second time. And actually, when you listen to that podcast episode, it's like the sort of before I did the promotion, and then halfway through, it stops, and then it goes to the after. And then I talk to Jeff again, and then he says, oh, this is what you did well, and this is what you did right, and here's what I would have done better. And so it's a great episode. Let me see if I could get that number. Jeff Goins, for those of you listening, it's I've been told it was one of the best podcasts to listen to.
Yeah, I've listened to that too, and it was just packed with value.
So that's episode number 79. It's called Time Travel and Book Marketing because in the middle we do actually time travel from before to after the launch.
Okay, I'll include it in the show notes for
cool.
Absolutely. So what did you learn from your experience of writing a book? Now, if you decided to write the second one, for example, what would you do differently?
Well, I am going to be writing a book very soon, and this is like more than just like a Kindle book. Not that there's anything wrong with just writing a Kindle book, but I am going to go potentially and most likely traditionally to try to get into the New York Times bestseller list. That's my goal. So we'll see what happens. And, I have all my friends like Chris Ducker and Jamie Tardy and my friend Jeff Rose, like they all came out with books in 2014. And I'm like, oh, it's so awesome. And I'm, I've been there with Chris when he's signing books and stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I can't wait to do that. And also it's been one of my life goals to go to the bookstore with my kids and show them the book and be like, this is Daddy's book. Like you could really do anything that you put your mind to. And I know that's cliche, but I think that would be a cool defining moment in their lives. And I want to create that for them. So, I might go traditional. self-published is on the shelf too, maybe, but we'll see. But I do want to write a second book. But there was a lot of things I picked up from this first go around. The biggest thing was, I had this story in my head the whole time about Let Go, and I've obviously told it before, but I never told it in this way. But I've wanted to, but I never really had the idea to do it. But ever since publishing it, just the feedback from the audience has just been amazing, like life-changing for a lot of people. People have literally sent me handwritten messages saying that the book changed their life, which is just incredible to hear. Mm-hmm. And so, we all have a book inside of us, and we all are, hopefully those of us listening, we're all about to or in the middle of writing a book. And so just think about the people on the other end who are going to read that book and how much that can actually influence their life or change them. That's something that I've realized now, that I have to write this other book that's in my head, because if I don't, I might be letting people down, and they might not even know it. So it's not about me anymore. It's about my audience and who it's, and how it's going to change them. How is it going to transform them? And that's another big thing that comes with book writing that I didn't really do with the first book that I didn't finish. Was, okay, when approaching this book, what is the main purpose? How am I going to actually transform people's lives? What, like, after they read this, how is their life going to be different? It was very clear with Let Go what that was. With Be Everywhere, I didn't really approach it that way, and because of that, it was harder for me to write. And I think when writing a book, you often have to work backwards. Like, what's the main goal? How are you going to transform? And then what are the supporting stories? What are the supporting chapters? What are the supporting points and bullet points? Getting down and then finally into the detail of, okay, here's the title of the chapter, and then even finishing with the title of the book. Sometimes you kind of have to work backwards. And so that's the approach I'm going to take second time, or should I say third time around, coming in 2015. And so, I know there's some great writers out there to follow too. I've been getting a lot of inspiration from Jeff and from Steve and a lot of people who, it's just in this group, the at patsfirstbook.com. It's just, I see people coming out with new books every day. It's very, very inspiring, and it's continuing to push me forward so I can provide something great as well.
So the group members also challenge you.
Oh, they do. They're amazing. And
well,
so,
it's a healthy challenge. I'm
it's a healthy
sure
challenge. Which is
useful.
a great point. I have mastermind groups that meet every week, and we all challenge each other. It's important to have other people in your life who can help challenge you. It's like if you go to the gym and you're just there by yourself, it can be difficult. I can't tell you how many times I've started going to the gym on my own and then gave up and then had to start over again later. Whereas if you're going with somebody, they'll help you. They'll push you forward. They'll hold you accountable. And then you could be there to help them too, and you just kind of help each other. And that's kind of what this group has grown to. So I'm really thankful for that. But even getting involved with one or two people specifically who sort of align with your goals, or maybe you're in the same niche, and you can work together to help each other out with your book. You can read each other's books and provide great advice for each other. I wouldn't be where I'm at today without the help of other people. So when I continue to write my book in the future, I'm going to be definitely working with people along the way and getting as much advice and feedback as possible. Always welcome that feedback. And I think another important point before I finish up is, there's a few negative reviews of Let Go. It is a rather shorter book, and, it can be hard to read those negative reviews sometimes, especially with something like Let Go, which is a very personal story. You just kind of have to ignore them. Like, I've luckily had the experience over 5 years of blogging online, and blogging is a platform for potential negative reviews and criticism as well. So I've learned to grow with thick skin, and you have to do that. As long as you know what you're doing and you're doing it for the right reasons, and you know that you're there to transform people's lives and help and provide value. There's going to be naysayers. There's going to be people who try to shoot you down. Don't waste your time on them, because for every one person that you spend that time trying to figure out or talk to or just get through in your head, that's time you're not providing to the people who could actually benefit from what you have to say or write.
Oh, absolutely. I always tell that no one has ever written a book which is liked by absolutely everyone. So, there will always be at least one person who won't like your book, and it's fine, because you're not writing it for absolutely everyone. You're writing it for those people you are writing it for. So that's true. Okay, just a personal question, just out of curiosity. What was the last book you gave up reading, and why did you give it up? Or if you start reading a book, you just have to finish it?
I usually have to finish it. I always give a book a chance, to see if in the beginning maybe it's not that good, but then I'll get through it. I think that, I mean, there is one book I haven't finished yet, and it was a book that I remember hearing Tim Ferriss talk about in his podcast when he was on with, gosh, I think it was Neil Strauss, who's a amazing writer. He was saying that he listens or reads to fiction books sometimes to help him with his nonfiction writing. And one of the books was 100 Years of Solitude. And
Marquez, yeah.
Yes. And I started listening to that book, and I was just having a hard time getting through it because typically with the books that I listen to, the nonfiction stuff, it's pretty straightforward in terms of what the information is about. And with a fiction book, like especially one like that, there's a lot of things going on and a lot of sort of levels of meaning, and so it was really hard for me. And so I put that off till later. I'm probably going to pick up the paperback instead of listening to it.
Yeah, it's a very nice book, but it's sometimes difficult to follow. So I can't even imagine how it will be possible to follow when you're just listening to it, because even while reading it, it needs like more concentration and a bit of extra attention than reading other fiction books. So it's not really a light read you can do in a transport, in a train or so, in the airplane or whatever, wherever it is.
Yeah, and that's when I usually consume my content. So
it's I can imagine why you didn't finish listening to it. Okay, and the very last question, because I don't want to take it too long, and I know that you're busy. Many writers have this problem about, considering their works as art and then having problem of monetizing that art. So, because very often, just people can't really live full time just by selling books, especially if they are writing fiction. So they are looking for other ways of, for example, maybe blogging or podcasting or creating some kind of platform and doing something with their audience in order to monetize it and have the possibility of eventually leaving their full-time jobs and having more time to write the books they want to write. What would be your advice about, how should they go about this? Where should they start? Is it even possible? What would you say?
It's definitely possible. I mean, we've heard many stories of even fiction writers now doing really well, and not just the big names, but a lot of people who sort of just came out from nowhere who are doing really well on Amazon and who have built a huge following. And so it definitely is possible, and it's definitely deserved. If you are providing value in terms of whether it's nonfiction advice in a book or maybe just entertainment in a fiction type series, you deserve to get paid for it. I mean, you put in the hard work and people are getting value out of it. You deserve to make money from your art. Absolutely. And so there are many different ways to do it. And I think the best way to do it is to build an audience just from whatever. I mean, that's obviously building an audience alone isn't going to make you money, but building an audience and then being able to turn them into raving fans or, survey them or whatever the case may be. I mean, there's different methods for different in terms of nonfiction or fiction. But I think even in a fiction book, if you were to build an audience and have this raving fan set who is there, I mean, they're going to buy every book that you come out with next. They're going to want to participate. People want to see you and have time with you, or they might fly out to see you, perhaps. We are also, as a culture in this entire world, where we love the people who create amazing things that entertain us, right? It's like celebrities and movie stars. And you don't have to be a big name in order to be one of those types of people. Like, people have flown out to see me speak. Like, some people flew to Australia just to see me speak at ProBlogger, this conference I just spoke to, which is like mind-boggling to me. Like, it's crazy that somebody would do that. But because I've just been producing and providing value, and I've communicated with my audience, they want to do that. And so there are opportunities to make money, and your audience will tell you, or it'll become obvious once you sort of create that audience. And you just want to make sure you are always looking at their best interest in mind. I know a lot of people, including authors, who have tried to really squeeze sort of every dollar out of their audience, where and this is mostly in the nonfiction space, but they read a book, but the book is actually just a big business card for a continuity program to get into a course, and then in that course they upsell them coaching. And I'm not saying that's bad. If you're always providing value, that's good. But it's when you aren't honest and authentic about it, or you're just kind of using trickery to get people to pay you money, that's not good. I'm all about being honest and upfront. And again, when you build that audience and you gain that trust, you are able to then monetize it in ways that can still provide value, but also pay you back at the same time.
And I think it's a sustainable thing and a long-term, strategy, because the other option you mentioned, I think it's a short-term thing. After the first book, the people will already, understand that it's not really that genuine, and most probably won't be buying the second book anymore.
Right, but if you're writing on Amazon, Amazon, for example, is one method of getting paid, and that's a great first step. But how else can you provide value? That's the main question. How else beyond the book can you provide value? Another person who's done this really well is Michael Hyatt from michaelhyatt.com, who published his book Platform and now has Platform University, where he's brought people in to his life and with videos and webinars and things like that. And, that is a great way to bring a community who has read this book together and have them communicate with each other and have sort of create this culture around this book that he's created. And that was a nonfiction book, but I know that can be done in fiction as well.
I see. Well, thank you very much for this conversation. I'm absolutely sure that it was very valuable, and the listeners got many things they should think about now and think over. And I'm sure that if, besides listening to this podcast, they also take action, they will get somewhere. I'm absolutely sure about this.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me. Best of luck to everybody out there.
Well, that was your today's dose of knowledge, inspiration, and encouragement. If you need some more, please check out my website at www.anialexander.com. Also, if you are really serious about sharing your story with the world and self-publishing your book, please see the page at www.anialexander.com/get-help. I repeat, www.anialexander.com/get-help, and maybe we will make it happen together. You will have a new episode on Monday. I don't know what it will be about or who it will be with, but since I'm committed to stick to my schedule, you will definitely have something, so meet you then. And now, go ahead and do what you're supposed to do. Right.